Hello and welcome back to Machine Learning. In this video, we are going to talk about random forests and support vector machines, which are both classification methods in supervised machine learning. So let's begin with random forest. The random forest classifier is an ensemble classifier which combines many decision trees. Okay, so we already saw decision trees in the previous video. And random forest is nothing but a combination of decision trees. And why is this ensembling done? It is done using the concept of bagging, okay, because you want different features to be reflected. And the reason for that is to train the trees enough such that contribution from each feature would come in a number of models, okay? We want each feature to contribute. And after the random forest is generated by combining all these trees, whenever you want to perform classification of a new node, of a new data point, you will take a majority vote from all the decision trees, and whatever is the majority, that will be the class assigned. So here is an example of a random forest. So you have a full data set, okay, out of which you will make subsets and create different trees. So this is the first tree, this is the second decision tree, this is tree N, and so on. So this when you have a new data point, so suppose you have a new data point. So if you have a new data point, you're going to take a majority vote from all these people, from all these different trees, and see what they say. If all of them, like you can see here, first tree says it should be class 1, second says it should be class 1, but the third one says it should be class 2. You're going to pick the class that is told by the majority of the trees, which means we pick class 1. And that would be the class assigned to this new data point. So that's how the algorithm works. Okay. So if there are n variables or features in the input data set, then you will select m subsets, where m is less than n, features at random out of the n number of features. And also observations or data instances should be picked in a random way. Then you will use this best split principle on these m features which you have selected to calculate the number of nodes D for your forest. And you will keep splitting all these nodes to child nodes till the tree is grown to the maximum possible extent. And then you will select a different subset of the training data with replacement to train another tree. So we are using a with replacement policy, which means once you have selected training data for one tree, you're going to put it all back and select training data for the next tree, which is of course random, but with replacement. And you will train another tree and follow the same steps which we saw earlier, and go on repeating this to build n decision trees. And the final class assignment will be done on the basis of majority votes, which are given from n different trees. Now, in a random forest, there is something called an OOB error which can occur. So what is that? So each tree is constructed using a different bootstrap sample from the original data, okay? And these samples, sometimes there are samples that are left out of the bootstrap, right? So let's say that I'm creating my ice decision tree, and I have taken some sample values from my original data set. And obviously there are some samples which are not used at all to create this particular tree, but they can be used to measure the performance of the model. And so what you do, you at the end of the run, predictions for each such sample evaluated each time, they are all tallied together, and the final prediction for that sample is obtained by taking a vote. So all the samples which are not used in the creation of your decision tree will be used to afterwards test it, to test the performance of individual decision trees, okay? So when you have the total error rate of predictions which you have from all such samples is something known as out of bag error rate, which is called OOB. And this error rate is shown in the form of confusion matrix. It is called a confusion matrix, which would reflect the OOB error rate. And because of this reason, the error rate displayed is often surprisingly high because it is reflected in a confusion matrix. So you might find it surprisingly high, but you can also measure the accuracy overall by using the accuracy function as well, right? Let's take a look at some advantages of random forests. So it runs very efficiently if you have large, expensive data sets, and it has a robust method for estimating missing data, so it can work well with that as well. Also, if you have large proportion of absent data, then also this is going to work well. And it is a powerful technique. It has powerful techniques for balancing the errors, okay, in a class population of unbalanced data sets. It also gives you estimates about which features are most important when you're performing your classification. And it also generates an internal unbiased estimate, which is known as a gauge of the generalization error, right? So we saw earlier confusion matrix, so it can do that also. And the generated forests can be saved for future use on some other data. It does not have to be just this data. And lastly, the random forest algorithm can be applied or used to solve not just classification problems, but regression problems as well. Let's take a look at some disadvantages. So this model, because it combines a number of decision trees to work well, it is sometimes not very easy to understand like a decision tree model. It is also computationally much more expensive than creating just one decision tree. And some of the applications of random forests are that it is a very powerful classifier. It combines the versatility of many decision trees into one single model, which is why it's very powerful. And because of these superior results, it is gaining wide adoption and popularity amongst machine learning practitioners to solve a wide number of classification problems. Now let's take a look at a program to implement random classifiers. To implement the random forest classifier, we will be requiring all of these libraries. So once again, we have pandas to do the reading of our CSV file. From sklearn, we are getting three things. One is the model selection for the train test split module. Another one is the metrics to use the accuracy score so that we can check the accuracy of our classifier. And from Ensembl, we are going to get random forest classifier to actually do the classification. Okay. And the first step is to read our CSV file, which I have uploaded on GitHub. And once the file is read, we are printing out the first 5 rows of our data set, which contains 7 attributes and 1 class column. So these 7 attributes are responsible for getting the value of the class, which can be either 1 or 0. And you can see all these columns are numeric or quantitative variables. We will decide from these attributes which ones are predictor values, which means the columns we will be using for prediction. So we will be using columns 0 to 7, right? Actually 0 to 6, which is why we are specifying the range 0 to 7 over here, because that's how Python works. So this is the range 0 to 7, and we are saying that all these attributes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they are all predictors. And this last attribute, which is the 7th index attribute, will be our target attribute. So we are again using the iloc function of the pandas library. Now our next step is to split our data into training and test. So we are doing that using the train test split function, where we are passing the values of predictors and target, which we created earlier. We are specifying the test size to be 0.3, which means I want 30% of my data to be test data and 70% training. You could also do an 80-20 split, which is another acceptable value. And you will specify a random state of 123, which means that is the amount of randomness you want while selecting the training and the test data. The next thing you are doing is creating a random forest classifier using this module right here, and we are storing that in an object called RF. Then we will try to fit our model onto this object. So to do that, we use the .fit function, pass the training data for both predictors as well as target. and the model is stored in a variable called model. And once that is done, now we're going to perform some predictions. So to do the predictions, we are going to use the predict function. And for prediction, we will only pass the predictors test. We will not pass the target test. Okay, so these are the target values generated for these given predictor values by our model. Now we want to check if how accurate these values are based on by comparing them with the actual values. So the actual values are stored in the target test, and the other values are stored in the values predicted by the model are stored in prediction. So if you check the accuracy, you get 0.906, which means your model is 90% accurate. Now let's talk about support vector machines. So SVM is a model which can do linear classification as well as regression. So just like random forests, SVM can also perform classification and regression. And it is based on the concept of a surface, and that surface is called a hyperplane, which draws a boundary between data instances plotted in the multidimensional feature space. Okay, so instead of one line, it is a hyperplane that classifies your data. Now, the output prediction of an SVM is one of two conceivable classes which are already defined in the training data. So in summary, what does this algorithm do? It builds an n-dimensional hyperplane model that assigns future instances into one of the two possible output classes. So there are two output classes, and it just performs classification of data into those two classes. So this is what a two-dimensional feature space looks like, where there are only two feature vectors that you're considering. And there the plane will look like a two-dimensional line. But if you have a multi-dimensional feature space with lots of columns, then it will look like this. So it's sort of a plane, but you know that we cannot actually draw and show, visualize a multi-dimensional space, right? We can visualize 2 dimensions or at the most 3 dimensions, but you cannot visualize the rest. So this is what it will look like. Now, what are support vectors in support vector machines? So they are the data points or the representing classes that are the critical component of a data set, and they are always near the identified set of lines. So wherever you have the hyperplane, the points that are closest to that hyperplane will be your support vectors. And if they are removed from your data, then they will drastically alter the position of the hyperplane, which would affect your classification a lot. So here you can see an example of support vectors. Consider this line in the middle as your hyperplane. And these vectors which you see, which are closest to this line, those are the vectors which are known as support vectors for this line. Now let's talk about the hyperplane and margin. So mathematically, in a two-dimensional space, if you create a hyperplane, it would have this equation C0 plus C1 x1 plus C2 x2 equal to 0. And this is nothing else but an equation of a straight line, like we used in linear regression. Okay, but you could extend this same concept and create an n-dimensional space hyperplane, which has this equation, C0 plus C1 x1 plus C2 x2, so on up to Cn xn equal to 0, which can also be represented like this as vector C into vector x plus C0 equal to 0. And spontaneously, the further or more distance from the hyperplane the data points lie, the more confident we can be about correct categorization. So if you create a line and for example, you create this type of a line and your data points are here, 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 they are very far away, then this line is much better than this line where the data points are very close to the line, okay? So when a new testing data point or data set is added, what happens? The side of the hyperplane it lands on will quickly decide for you which class you're going to assign to it. And the distance between the hyperplane and data points is known as a margin, okay? So if this is your hyperplane, the distance between this hyperplane and the data points, like this will be your margin. This is called the margin. Now let's see how you can identify the correct hyperplane for a given SVM. So take a look at this data set. Here you have some triangles and circles, so obviously two different classes. You have three hyperplanes given, and since hyperplanes are actually shown in n-dimensional area, but we cannot visualize that, so we are just using two-dimensional ones. And here you have three hyperplanes, A, B, and C. Which one's the best? You can say it is A because A correctly classifies all the data, isn't it? B and C do not do that, so that's why it's A. Take a look at this one. You have three planes again, A, B, and C. All of them are correctly classifying the data, but you have to see the highest margin. The margin has to be the maximum, which means all data points should be as far away as possible from your hyperplane. So if you take a look at that, you'll notice that for A, all the data points are far away. So this is the nearest data point, which is at maximum distance from A, and nearest data point from the other class, which is also at maximum distance from A, then from C and B. So we will pick A once again. If you have this type of a situation where you will see that hyperplane A has these data points very close to it, but hyperplane B has these data points very much far away from it. So you might think that B is a good choice, but B is not even able to classify data correctly. So whenever you have a situation where you have to choose between margin and classification, you have to pick classification, and you will pick A because A is actually classifying your data properly. Take a look at this situation. You have this one data point that is an outlier, and because it's far away from its own group, but it is there in some other group, some other class. In such cases, how do you create a hyperplane? So SVMs are generally such algorithms that would nullify the effect of such outliers. So SVM will not consider these outlier while creating a hyperplane, and that's how it should be in order to create a proper hyperplane. You don't want this outlier to affect the position of the hyperplane and then have issues with your classification. So to conclude, how do you select a hyperplane? So first, you should segregate the data instances belonging to the two classes in the best way possible. That's our first rule. Second, it should maximize the distances between the nearest data point, which means maximize the margin that we talked about. The third point is if there is a need to prioritize between higher margin and lesser misclassification, you will choose lesser misclassification. So it's classification over margin. Let's take a look at some advantages of SVMs. So first, it can be used for classification and regression, both, as we saw earlier. It is very robust. Okay, it's not very much impacted with data that has noise or outliers in it. And the prediction results are very promising using this. The disadvantages are that it is applicable only for binary classification. Okay, so that means you can, just like we saw an example, like, whether someone gets a job or not. So there are only two possibilities, yes or no. Whether some object belongs to a blue class or a red class. So there are only two possibilities, blue and red. If you want even a green class and a pink class, then that's not possible with an SVM. Okay. And it is very complex, right? It's almost like a black box when it deals with a high dimensional data set. So you can have as many features as you want, but you can classify that into only two classes. And so sometimes it's very difficult and very impossible to understand all these classes. So there are things in SVM which are very mathematical and which we have not covered in machine learning here because we don't want to get into that much mathematics. And it's also slow for a large data set. Okay, so if you have lots of features in the data set, lots of rows in the data set, then this is going to work really slow. And it's also quite memory intensive. let's take a look at some applications. So it is most effective when you have binary classification, for example, for solving a machine learning problem with two classes. One common problem on which SVM can be applied is in the field of bioinformatics. More specifically, when you want to detect cancer or other genetic disorders, right? So in such cases, SVM works quite well. It can also be used in detecting the image of a face by binary classification of images into face and non-face components. So for facial detection, it works perfectly. And you can have a lot more such applications, which we can describe here for SVM, but we are not going to, because now we are going to proceed to um, actually implementing SVM in Python. So this is the SVM classifier implemented in Python. Here you have, once again, two libraries, pandas and sklearn, just as we saw in random forest. From pandas, we will just import pandas itself, and we need the train test split, accuracy score, and SVM from sklearn. Okay. And just like we did previously, we are reading the CSV file, printing the first 5 rows, selecting the first the first 7 columns as predictors, and the last column as our target. We will split the data into training and test, where the size of the test is going to be 30%. The random state is 123. So up to this, it's the same as what we did in random forest algorithm. Now what we are doing is creating the CSV object, the support vector machine object, which we can do by calling this function SVC and passing into it the type of kernel you want. So we haven't been able to discuss what kinds of kernels are there, but there are different types of kernels like linear, polynomial, and RBF. You don't need to get into the details of that, but you can try them out. So we are using the RBF kernel over here and creating this object. Next, we are going to fit our training data onto it and create the model. Once the training data is fit, we will perform prediction using the predict function and pass our predictor's test data into it. And whatever is the result, we store in the prediction variable. And then we can calculate our accuracy score based on the target test and the prediction. So we are comparing the two, and we get 0.84375. So that is our accuracy. So that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one, and thank you for watching.